Welcome to Sierra Club Chronicles. On September 11th, 2001, and in the weeks afterward, our nation's heroes gave everything they had to the rescue and recovery effort. Now it turns out the government wasn't telling the truth when they assured them the air they were breathing at Ground Zero was safe.
Every once in a while, you would think that the dogs found something and everybody would get quiet. I just looked off to the right, and under a beam, I saw this enormous swatch of red. And I was like, oh my God, we got a lady underneath this beam. When we started digging, then came out a white stripe. And I go, oh my God, it's a flag. It wound up being the flag that was flying on the World Trade Center as it came down. Maybe those people got into the flag. Maybe their DNA is throughout that fabric. And that's what makes that flag special. As I was sitting home watching the Winter Olympics open in Salt Lake City, the flag got carried into the Olympics, and all of a sudden, the whole stadium, and I guess the whole world, went silent. And I looked there and I said, that's my flag. And I was proud to be an American. What I want to ask Congress is, why are they leaving us like this? We're just as American as everybody else.
The heroes, the firemen, the police, the military folks, the volunteers, the sanitation workers, all the people who were trying to get Lower Manhattan back up and running are on their own. And the society and the government has abandoned them.
I was the life of the party. I was a clown. I worked hard and I played hard. I worked anywhere from 60 to 90 hours a week, but I always found time to stay fit, stay in shape, play sports, golf, football, softball. I don't know, when there was a problem, everybody called me, you know, I was the problem solver.
I became employed in the construction field. You're seeing this enormous erector set of iron and bolts. To see all of these things come together and complete this project that you were given, it is extremely rewarding. I felt helping to build America was another way of showing my patriotism.
I prided myself on, I used to play in the softball team. I used to be able to hit the ball to the second baseman and still beat the ball to first. I mean, that's how fast I was. And I took great pride in that. One thing that was great about my job, being a paramedic and doing emergency medicine. Every day I went to work, you never know what you're gonna get.
When the first tower hit, they said a plane hit. And we kept working, you know, for like another 15, 20 minutes until they just, you know, they kicked us off the job site and everybody had to get home.
I got a phone call from my commanding officer, and he's a full-time National Guardsman. And he said, turn on the TV. And I says, well, what channel? And he told me it didn't matter.
Comes over the air on the radio that there's a single 40 at the World Trade Center. Single 40. I looked at Jimmy, he looked at me, and the student says, oh, that's a plane crash, that's a plane crash.
My whole life has been lead by example. They asked me to go and I went.
We witnessed the collapse. My drive was to see if we can find survivors.
This is what I do best. I've done it before. I figured that I'd be ready for it.
When we arrived, it was total chaos. There's a woman coming out of the second tower, still standing. She comes outside and she collapsed right in front of the tower. And she's crying and she's bleeding. So I go over to her and I looked at her and I said, look at me, look at me, look at me. You're gonna make it. You're gonna be all right. You're gonna make it. And no sooner than I said that, I heard the rumble again. It was the second tower coming down on us as we were standing there. So I grabbed her and we ran, and right across the street from the train center is the Hilton Millennium. And as we dove into the Hilton Millennium, we got buried in the hotel. And all the debris and everything came right in with us. Total darkness, debris falling. You couldn't see an inch in front of you. Someone took a big bucket of dirt and just dumped it down your throat. And I knew I was dead. I knew I was dead.
As soon as you came onto that site, the smell, the sounds of the fighter jets flying overhead, it all played such a vital part in what compelled you to stay there. We were there looking for survivors. We were there because that's what our heart told us. And there were no survivors.
I was backing in some trucks, and they had a piece of steel on the ground, maybe 60 feet, 80 feet long. You know, it was long. Those pieces of steel were big. Now, I would back that truck in far enough with a machine to take that steel and put it in the truck. So as I was stopping that truck driver doesn't see me. That piece of steel's falling. I don't want to get hit by the truck. I jump out of the way. The piece of steel catches my foot. It was roughly estimated at about 8,000 pounds. I took my shoe off. The guy next to me fainted. I took a belt off of him. I made a tourniquet. And the bottom of my foot from the crush split my foot open where it was compound fractures. You know, thinking about this is hard.
I barely make it to the doctor's office. I walk in, I go to sit down. She says, don't even bother to sit down. They're giving me some medicine. I start to feel a little better. So then they said, we're going to give you some more medicine. Won't you stay here? Won't you sleep so we can keep an eye on you? I said, okay, no problem. Because as a matter of fact, I still had my uniform on. And all of a sudden, I woke up. I couldn't breathe.
In my entire life, I have never witnessed nor ever heard of green smoke. I witnessed this in many different occasions.
It was a green toxic soup. Now you have the fire department towel ladders pouring water down on it, trying to suppress the smoke. And all it's doing is basically like searing a hamburger on the grill. It just makes the steam that more intense.
You know, within a few days, you need to get control of a site. So I'll grant Bedlam for the first couple days. We understand that, but within a few days, you have to start taking care of the living, and that's what really did not happen at Ground Zero. So you had some people with proper respiratory protection, but many people did not have proper respiratory protection. Many people wore it for a while and then took it off because the work was hot and hard and nobody was there enforcing it. And you had the Environmental Protection Agency almost immediately coming out and saying, we're not finding problems, it's okay, the air is safe.
Christy Todd Whitman, the head of EPA, went on national television and told the newspapers also that the air was safe to breathe within 3 days of the towers coming down. And she said that was as a result of EPA's taking tests and determining that the air was safe to breathe. And that was a total fabrication. It was a lie. There's a lot of pressure to give the impression that everything is back to normal 3 days, 5 days, 7 days after the World Trade Towers came down. It was documented that the White House ordered EPA to tell these lies, to downplay the seriousness of the environmental hazards. There were interviews that we had with the public relations people at EPA and emails from White House personnel to them, instructing them to change press releases, and what to say.
So this was coming right out of the White House. It was the White House Council on Environmental Quality that did this while Ground Zero was still smoking, and I mean really smoking. They reopened the stock exchange and encouraged people to come back to work. You had all kinds of people coming back into the Ground Zero area, believing that it was safe. And this belief affected the workers at Ground Zero themselves. It's not that bad. It can't be that bad. If they're letting kids come back, if they're reopening schools, how bad can it really be? I want to get this job done as fast as I can.
The agencies didn't hand out masks until Friday the 14th. And actually, when they started handing out the HEPA masks with the little purple canisters on them, it would be very hard to breathe after 2 or 3 hours, because the canisters would get full of particulate matter and you'd have to change them out. So one can only think, what were you actually breathing in when you had the paper mask for the previous couple days?
A lot of things were just pulverized by the force of the towers crumbling. The dust went everywhere. It blackened Lower Manhattan. What did it contain? You get dioxins and furans, you'll get asbestos. There were a gazillion computers, so you're going to get lead and copper, cadmium. There were fluorescent lights all over the place, so you got mercury. It also contained a lot of glass, little itty-bitty fibers of glass that just wreaked havoc in people's lungs. It was really very, very harmful to breathe this material in. Most of these toxic chemicals don't even have a safe threshold level. There is no safe level of exposure.
Well, now we know. I mean, at the time, I wasn't really thinking about anything being toxic or dangerous. It's just, the debris from the building. But now that debris from the building it's been a curse.
Well, the estimates are that there were some 40,000 or more people who came to the Ground Zero site. In our screening program, we've seen now some 11,000 people. About half of those people have persistent respiratory symptoms up to the time of their examination, and for some, that's over 2 years from the time that their exposure began. We've seen people with very significant respiratory problems, including things like persistent sinusitis, persistent laryngitis. These are inflammatory conditions of the upper airways. And we've seen people with new onset asthma who never had asthma before. For some people, this is totally disabling.
Asthma, post-traumatic stress disorder, and rhinitis with my nose. That's why sometimes I breathe through my mouth because my nose get all clogged up and the nose will start draining, and that's permanent, and that's not going to change. And right now I take, actually I was on 2 medicines before 9/11, so right now I'm on 12 different medicines.
One more?
If you were at the World Trade Center, and I don't care what capacity you were there at, you developed a cough.
Okay, and cough? Okay, and one more.
I developed this cough within a few days, if that long, because of the amount of hours that I put in at this site.
Let's see. Are you taking anything for congestion today?
As time elapsed and I started getting these lung infections, I started seeing that, I suffered something down here that's got to be addressed. There's 3 more prescriptions here.
Yeah, I see that.
So, 3 more prescriptions that have to be filled. That's 22 different medications now.
I don't know. That worries me.
Worries you.
I don't know how they all interact with one another.
I expressed to her today that I'm not crazy about taking medication, especially in the quantity I'm taking it in. So she understood, but still, what are you gonna do? If you got these symptoms, you gotta take medication to cover it. I'm continuing to work because I am not gonna let myself lose time from work. I have to work. I got 3 kids on child support. Here I'm supposed to be made of an indestructible substance. I've got to perform in a job task that the average person doesn't even want to think of holding.
The coughing got so bad by 10 o'clock that night. I got taken to a triage station with a couple of my guys. There was traces of blood in the sputum, and the sputum was this gray black stuff, and I don't think anybody that chain smokes 6 packs of cigarettes a day had anything like that ever come out of their mouth when they coughed.
You gotta understand, I've had 5 or 6 surgeries since getting out of hospital on top of all the surgeries I had. So when I got to my next surgery, I failed another breathing test.
Let's have you take some deep breaths with your mouth wide open.
And then I failed another one. Then my last surgery last year, I failed a breathing test. You have to take a pre-surgical physical before you have surgery. And I said, there's something wrong there. I couldn't blow the ball. You know, the machine, you blow the ball up. And I was like, how can I not? You know, you look at it, it's like, this, a 4-year-old can do this. You know, and if I expand, I got a pretty big chest where I feel like my lungs are full of, and I was like, how can I not do this?
You cannot spin away how many people are sick. It's not 30 people or 50 people or 100 people or 200 people. We're talking about thousands of people who are sick because of this.
I was always hoping that, you know, this cough would go away or it would dissipate, and it didn't.
I mean, I'm not a big man, and people are always amazed at how much I can lift carrying these patients. And it was really becoming hard. Couldn't do it anymore.
And I continued to work with lung infections, succumbing to pneumonia. I kept going and going and going. My psychological finally said, this guy can't take no more.
I've always been a worker, a hard worker. So I didn't know I'd be here. But post-traumatic took its toll. My feet took their toll. My breathing took their toll. I applied for the September 11th fund twice, denied twice. That's so hard to... Due to the time frame of my injury, I didn't qualify. Although my injuries were life-threatening, which they were, and catastrophic, which they were, I did not qualify because of the time frame. So after 96 hours, they deemed it not a terrorist act anymore, and I didn't qualify.
I had a letter of commendation from the president. I had a letter from the governor. I had a letter from Congress, and I received a flag from Congress. And when I got my reply from Victims' Compensation, it basically told me, although September 11th was a terrible thing, we can't prove you're there. And it's like, are you out of your mind?
If they lost their job, then they also lost their health coverage, so they couldn't even go through their normal HMO that they had had when they were on the job to get health coverage. So it was a double whammy. To me, people like John Fiel and John Sferrazzo have really become heroes twice, because in their own pain, in their own grief, in their own distress over their loss of health, they're still fighting. They're not just fighting for themselves, they're fighting for everyone. They're not just fighting for the workers at Ground Zero, they're supportive of the people in the community that are still fighting for a cleanup of the dust. And our country still doesn't care about them. Our country still won't do right by them. And I think that's a sin and a shame.
You're talking about Americans on American soil, Americans who pay the taxes that keep the country going. Take care of the people who take care of you. End of story.
We're losing our health, we're losing everything we ever owned. Guys are getting divorced, guys are going into drug rehab. There's something wrong with that. And that's why we keep going to Washington, and that's why we keep advocating.
We have with us today over 35 injured workers And we are here at a time when we should be making the federal response stronger to meet the extensive health needs of 9/11.
All right. Be strong, bro. Be strong.
John,
Sir, how are you? How you been?
How are you, Tom?
Good.
It's good to see you.
Hanging in there.
But we are instead here today fighting to save funds already promised by Washington for the injured heroes and heroines of 9/11.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. How are you, John Field, injured 9/11 worker?
Instead of offering a plan to strengthen the federal response to the 9/11 health emergency, the White House is instead seeking to take back $125 million in aid that was meant to help support injured workers.
9/11 worker.
We cannot allow Ground Zero responders to become the forgotten heroes of 9/11.
Instead of trying to figure out what's at the root of this scandal, why isn't the workers' compensation system doing what it should do for these workers? They said, well, you didn't spend the money, so we're taking it back.
And the Walsh Amendment is a piece of legislation to stop the money from going back to the federal government, but instead be used by the state to help the workers, the heroes.
Congressman, how are you, John Field?
I'm in a boat.
How are you, sir?
I'm fine.
We're injured workers from 9/11. We're looking for your support to keep the Walsh Amendment in New York.
Sorry?
Keep the money in New York that was allocated. It would be great if we had your support. So we'll talk later. And how are you, John Field, injured 9/11 worker? All of these guys right here, injured 9/11 workers.
Are you really?
We're looking for support for the Walsh Amendment.
This is why, like I said before, you know, because John and I discussed this.
Oh, guys, come on, what are you doing? John!
Relax, John, relax. Relax.
I am. What's the matter? What's the matter? Say it. What's the matter? No, not leave you alone. Talk to me. What? Come here. Come on, man.
See you.
Congressman Maloney.
The team is here. Hey. Oh, my buddies. She explained that the money has now been spent, and so now we have to designate it as emergency money in order to get it in the conference. That's the only way we can get it restored.
How many more people like Tim Keller have to die before it's, you know, it's an emergency, you know? Bunch of... I'm gonna put my good foot in someone's ass and then play hacky sack with their colon, man. I'm pissed.
Now let's see where their hearts are. Let's see how they perform for us. Because one thing I can tell you, I am going to wind up with a list of those who voted in favor and those who voted against the mandatory, necessary needs of the people who gave all they could. And I will let the public know how these politicians that supposedly represent us, how they performed and how they feel about their fellow Americans in their hour of need.
This is the United States. I mean, ever since we grown up, we said the Pledge of Allegiance. We always loved the flag. And it shouldn't be a Democratic Republican thing where I'll give you this for that. I mean, for once they should leave their political considerations at the door and go in there and vote as Americans and, God damn it, do the right thing. We're all ready. Sunday, September 11th, 2005.
Well, I've only been to Ground Zero twice since I've been hurt. And I don't do too good in the city now. Just, you know.
I'm not too happy about being here again. I feel the things that created my nightmares all over.
Margaret L. Benson.
Dominic J. Parati. It's hard enough for me to go there and, know that that location has altered my life dramatically. Most people don't understand that unless you've actually been in that position.
Joseph DiPilato, Douglas Frank DiStefano, and my beautiful baby brother, Stephen Jeffrey Cangelosi, and my brother, firefighter John Patrick Tierney. We miss you, Johnny.
John F. Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And myself, my partner, and a lot of other people who were rescue workers down there on 9/11, we did for our country. And now we're just asking for a little help.
It's just unbelievable that you have to fight at all. Why should we have to fight for a workers' compensation system that works? Why should we have to fight for proper testing and cleanup? Why should we have to fight for medical monitoring? Why should we have to fight for medical care for the people that don't have another way to get medical care? Why should we have to fight for any of these things? Why do we pay our taxes if our government can't respond in the aftermath of a disaster of this proportion?
We took one on the chin. But we bounce back. We're resilient as a country, and we move forward. But sometimes we move forward and we forget what we're leaving behind.
For the latest information on the 9/11 Heroes' efforts, and to learn more about what our government can do to protect and prepare us for disaster, please visit us at sierraclubtv.org.
Funding provided by the Ford Foundation, with additional support from the Sierra Club Foundation.